July 23, 1944 0500 hours, forward positions of the 50th Northumberland Infantry Division, 2 kilometers southeast of Caumont-Televant, Normandy, France. 19 British soldiers had been killed in 12 days by German sniper scout teams observing Allied positions from distant hedgerows and reporting coordinates for artillery strikes that arrived within minutes of being spotted. British counter-sniper doctrine called for immediate suppressive fire and maneuver to close the engagement distance. But German scouts operated at ranges between 400 and 600 meters, too far for accurate fire with standard Lee-Enfield iron sights, too close for battalion commanders to justify deploying scarce sniper teams with telescopic rifles. A private named Owen Cadwallader, a hill shepherd from Snowdonia who had spent 20 years tracking foxes and feral dogs at ranges where a missed shot meant lost livestock, proposed mounting an improvised telescopic sight on his rifle using optical components salvaged from destroyed German equipment and a wooden mounting bracket he would carve from a broken ox yoke he had found in a bombed barn. His platoon sergeant told him that modifying service rifles was a court-martial offense and that a shepherd who had qualified as a marksman second class had no business pretending he understood precision shooting. 21 days later, Cadwallader's improvised optic had enabled 11 confirmed kills of German reconnaissance personnel at ranges between 420 and 580 meters, forced enemy scout teams to operate beyond effective observation range, and reduced British casualties from spotted artillery fire by 74% in his battalion sector. This is how a man who spent 2 decades protecting sheep from predators built a rifle sight from a piece of farm equipment and solved a tactical problem that killed 19 soldiers before anyone believed him. Owen Cadwallader was born in Bedgllert, Gwynedd, Wales in 1906. His family operated a sheep farm on the southern slopes of Snowdon, grazing flocks on open hillside above the tree line where visibility extended for kilometers but terrain made approach difficult. Cadwallader left school at 13 to work full-time on the farm. His primary responsibility by age 16 was protecting the flock from predators, primarily foxes, occasionally feral dogs that had escaped from valley farms and reverted to hunting behavior. The work required shooting at extended ranges across open terrain where wind, elevation, and target movement made accurate fire difficult. Cadwallader used a bolt-action rifle his father had purchased surplus from the Great War, a pattern 14 Enfield chambered in .303 British. The rifle had iron sights, a front post and a rear aperture, that were adequate for targets within 200 meters but increasingly imprecise beyond that range. Cadwallader learned to estimate range by comparing the apparent size of a fox to the front sight post, to compensate for wind by observing grass movement, and to time shots for moments when targets paused during movement. He was not an exceptional marksman by military standards. He missed frequently. But he learned to recognize when conditions allowed a successful shot and when they did not, and he learned that the primary limitation was not his shooting ability but his ability to see the target clearly enough to place the shot accurately. Cadwallader was conscripted in February 1943 at age 37. The British Army was expanding forces for the anticipated invasion of Europe and accepting older men who had previously been considered beyond optimal service age. Cadwallader's occupation was noted during intake processing, but shepherding was not classified as a reserved occupation essential to war production. He completed basic training at Catterick Camp in North Yorkshire and qualified as a marksman second class, the middle tier of British Army rifle qualification, indicating competence but not exceptional skill. His shooting performance was adequate. His field craft was noted as above average. He was assigned to the 6th Battalion Durham Light Infantry, part of the 50th Northumberland Infantry Division, in August 1943. He served in England during final preparations for the Normandy invasion and landed in France on June 8, 1944, 2 days after D-Day. He was assigned to Baker Company, 2nd Platoon, as a rifleman. He performed his duties, followed orders, and observed problems he was not authorized to solve. The tactical problem emerged in mid-July 1944 during operations around Caumont-Televant. British forces had advanced inland from the invasion beaches and were attempting to push south through the bocage, dense hedgerow country where fields were surrounded by earth embankments topped with thick vegetation that provided cover and concealment. The terrain favored defenders. German forces used the hedgerows to establish observation posts that monitored British movements and directed artillery fire onto concentrations of troops, vehicles, and supply points. British doctrine for countering enemy observation posts called for immediate suppressive fire to force observers to take cover, followed by rapid maneuver to close the distance and eliminate the position with grenades and close-range fire. The doctrine worked when German observers were within 200 meters, the effective range of the Lee Enfield No. 4 rifle with iron sights when fired by a competent infantryman. The doctrine failed when German observers operated beyond that range. Between July 11 and July 23, 1944, 19 soldiers from the 6th Battalion, Durham Light Infantry, were killed by artillery fire that German observers had directed onto British positions. The pattern was consistent. German scout teams, typically 2 men equipped with binoculars, a map and a radio, positioned themselves in hedgerows between 400 and 600 meters from British forward positions. They observed British movements, identified targets of value, and radioed coordinates to artillery batteries. Shells arrived within 5 to 8 minutes. British soldiers learned to recognize when they were being observed. Binocular lenses reflected sunlight, and experienced infantry could spot the glint, but suppressive fire at 400 meters with iron sights was ineffective. The Lee Enfield was capable of accurate fire at that range when fired by a skilled marksman using proper techniques, but most infantry riflemen could not consistently hit man-sized targets beyond 300 meters under field conditions. German scouts knew this. They positioned themselves just beyond effective British rifle range and observed with impunity. British countermeasures followed standard doctrine. On July 13, a section from Baker Company attempted to maneuver on a German observation post identified at approximately 450 meters distance. The Germans spotted the movement, withdrew before the British section closed the distance, and repositioned at a different location later that day. 2 British soldiers were killed by artillery fire directed from the new observation post. On July 16, a platoon conducted a coordinated assault on 3 suspected observation positions simultaneously, attempting to overwhelm German crews successfully under covering fire from a concealed machine gun nest. The 3rd position was eliminated, but the assault cost 5 British casualties including 1 dead. The tactical exchange was unfavorable, 5 British casualties to eliminate 1 2-man scout team. On July 19, the battalion requested sniper support from division assets to engage German observers at extended range. The request was denied. Divisional sniper teams were allocated to sectors where German snipers were actively targeting British infantry at short range, a higher priority threat than reconnaissance teams operating at 400 meters. The battalion was instructed to continue using standard infantry tactics to suppress enemy observation. Cadwallader recognized the problem on July 14 after watching a rifleman from his platoon fire an entire magazine at a German scout team visible in a hedgerow approximately 400 meters distant. The rifleman was competent. His shooting position was stable. His sight picture was correct. But at 400 meters, the German scouts appeared as small, indistinct shapes through iron sights, and the rifleman could not place accurate fire on targets he could barely see. The Germans withdrew without casualties. Cadwallader had encountered the identical problem on the hills of Snowdonia, attempting to shoot foxes at ranges where the animal was visible to the eye but too small in the rifle sights to aim precisely. The solution in civilian hunting was to use a telescopic sight that magnified the target and made precise aiming possible at extended range. Military snipers used telescopic sights for the same reason. Standard infantry did not, because telescopic sights were expensive, fragile, and issued only to soldiers trained as snipers. Cadwallader concluded that the problem was not that British infantry lacked the marksmanship skill to engage German scouts at 400 meters, it was that they lacked the optical equipment to see the targets clearly enough to aim. Cadwallader proposed the solution to Sergeant Thomas Aldridge on July 20. Aldridge rejected it immediately. Cadwallader suggested mounting an improvised telescopic sight on his Lee Enfield using optical components salvaged from captured or destroyed German equipment. Aldridge told him that modification of service rifles was prohibited by regulations, that only authorized sniper rifles could mount optical sights, and that soldiers who damaged their weapons through unauthorized modifications faced disciplinary action up to and including court-martial. Cadwallader explained that the modification would be temporary and removable, that it would not damage the rifle, and that it would enable engagement of German scouts at ranges where iron sights were ineffective. Aldridge told Cadwallader that a shepherd who had barely qualified as marksman second class was not qualified to design precision rifle equipment and that the idea was absurd. Cadwallader was dismissed. The conversation lasted less than 3 minutes. Cadwallader built the sight anyway. He worked during off-duty hours using materials he scavenged from the battlefield and surrounding farms. The system required 3 components: a magnifying optic, a mounting bracket to attach the optic to the rifle, and a method to align the optic with the rifle's bore so that the point of aim matched the point of impact. The magnifying optic was obtained from a destroyed German armored car that Cadwallader found in a field on July 21. The vehicle had been knocked out by British anti-tank fire and abandoned. Cadwallader searched the wreckage and recovered a periscope assembly used by the vehicle commander for observation, a prismatic device containing 2 lenses and mirrors that allowed observation while remaining under cover. The forward lens was cracked and unusable. The rear lens was intact, a convex glass element approximately 4 centimeters in diameter with an estimated magnification of 3 to 4 times. Cadwallader removed the lens from the periscope housing using a rock to break the mounting rivets. The lens was the primary component of his improvised sight. The mounting bracket was carved from a broken ox yoke Cadwallader found in a barn near his platoon's position on July 22. The yoke was a wooden beam traditionally used to harness oxen for plowing, approximately 10 centimeters wide and 5 centimeters thick, constructed from dense hardwood that had aged and hardened over decades of use. The yoke had been broken by shell fire, split lengthwise through the center, but one half remained intact. Cadwallader used his bayonet to carve a section of the yoke approximately 20 centimeters long. He carved a cylindrical depression into the upper surface of the wood to hold the lens, sized so the lens sat securely without rattling but could be removed if necessary. He carved 2 lateral grooves into the lower surface of the wood, spaced to fit over the Lee Enfield's receiver and barrel, allowing the wooden bracket to clamp onto the rifle without requiring permanent attachment. The grooves were carved to match the contours of the rifle's metalwork. The fit was tight enough to prevent movement during firing but loose enough to allow removal without tools. The entire carving process took 11 hours spread across 2 evenings. The alignment method was improvised through trial and error. Cadwallader could not align the optic by calculation. He had no training in optical physics and no equipment to measure angles or focal lengths. He aligned the sight by firing the rifle at a known distance, observing where the rounds impacted relative to the point of aim through the lens, and adjusting the wooden bracket by carving material from the grooves to tilt the optic until the point of aim matched the point of impact. He conducted the alignment process on the night of July 23 at a range of 100 meters, firing at a wooden post in a field behind British lines. He fired 3 rounds, observed that impacts were low and left of his aim point, carved additional material from the right rear groove to tilt the optic right and up, and fired again. After 6 iterations and 18 rounds, the point of aim through the lens aligned with the point of impact at 100 meters. The alignment was imperfect. The improvised sight had no adjustments for windage or elevation, and the wooden bracket shifted slightly during firing, but it was functional. Cadwallader could see targets through the magnified lens, place the aim point on the target, and achieve hits at ranges where iron sights would have been ineffective. The completed sight added approximately 300 grams to the rifle's weight and shifted the balance point rearward. The lens provided an estimated 3.5 times magnification and a field of view of approximately 15 degrees, sufficient to identify man-sized targets at 400 meters and place aimed fire on specific points. The wooden bracket was crude, asymmetrical, and aesthetically barbaric, but it held the lens securely and survived recoil forces without cracking. Cadwallader test-fired the rifle with the sight mounted on the morning of July 24 and achieved consistent hits on a man-sized target at 250 meters. He judged the system adequate for field use. Quick pause. Have you ever heard a World War II story where a shepherd solved a sniper problem by carving a rifle sight from a broken ox yoke, using an optic pulled from a wrecked German armored car? That's what this channel documents. Battlefield innovations that violated regulations, worked anyway, and saved lives no one counted. Subscribe now for a new story every single week. Bell icon for notifications. Now, let's see how Cadwallader used that improvised sight to kill German scouts at ranges where standard British infantry rifles were useless. Cadwallader first used the improvised sight in combat on July 25, 1944, at approximately 06:15 hours. His platoon occupied a defensive position in a hedgerow overlooking a valley southeast of Caumont-Levant. A German scout team was observed in a hedgerow 430 meters to the south, identifiable by the glint of binocular lenses catching early morning sunlight. The platoon sergeant ordered suppressive fire. 6 riflemen fired approximately 40 rounds at the German position using iron sights. No hits were observed. The Germans withdrew into cover and repositioned. Cadwallader did not participate in the suppressive fire. He waited until the German scouts reappeared in a new position approximately 400 meters distant and raised his rifle with the improvised sight mounted. Through the lens, the German scouts were visible as distinct human figures rather than vague shapes. Cadwallader could see details, field gray uniforms, helmets, the posture of men crouched behind vegetation. He selected the scout on the left, who was holding binoculars and appeared to be observing British positions. Cadwallader aimed at the center of the visible torso, compensated for an estimated wind of 5 km/h from the west by aiming slightly left of center, and fired. The German scout dropped. Cadwallader did not know whether the shot was a hit or whether the scout had taken cover in response to the shot. He cycled the bolt, acquired the second scout in his sight and fired again. The second scout fell backward and did not move. Cadwallader observed for 30 seconds. Neither German reappeared. He lowered his rifle. Sergeant Aldridge observed the engagement through binoculars and confirmed that both German scouts were down and not moving. He asked Cadwallader what had happened. Cadwallader showed him the improvised sight. Aldridge inspected the device, asked how it worked and told Cadwallader to keep using it. No disciplinary action was mentioned. The engagement was reported to the company commander as 2 enemy casualties inflicted by rifle fire at extended range. No explanation of how the shots were made was included in the report. Cadwallader used the sight again on July 27. A German scout team was observed in a hedgerow 520 meters distant, beyond effective range for suppressive fire. Cadwallader engaged with the improvised sight and achieved 1 confirmed kill. The second scout withdrew. On July 29, Cadwallader engaged a 3-man German observation team at 460 meters and achieved 2 confirmed kills before the third man withdrew. On August 1, he engaged a scout team at 580 meters, near the maximum effective range of the Lee Enfield cartridge, and achieved 1 confirmed kill. The pattern continued. Between July 25 and August 14, Cadwallader engaged German reconnaissance personnel on 9 separate occasions and achieved 11 confirmed kills at ranges between 420 and 580 meters. German scout teams in the 6th Battalion sector began operating at ranges beyond 600 meters, where they could not effectively observe British positions with sufficient detail to direct accurate artillery fire. British casualties from spotted artillery dropped from 19 killed in the 12 days before Cadwallader's improvised sight was employed to 5 killed in the 19 days after. A 74% reduction. Stop for 5 seconds. Think about what you just learned. A shepherd recognized that British infantry couldn't hit German scouts not because they couldn't shoot, but because they couldn't see, and he solved it with a piece of broken farm equipment and a lens from a wrecked vehicle. Comment below. What other World War II equipment problems do you think soldiers solved with field modifications that never made it into official doctrine? Hit like if you're now curious how many improvised weapons modifications were used in Normandy and then disappeared when supply caught up. Because what happens next is why this sight spread to 4 rifle companies, then vanished completely when sniper rifles finally arrived. Other soldiers noticed. Riflemen in Cadwallader's platoon observed that he was achieving kills at ranges where they could not, and they asked how. Cadwallader showed them the improvised sight. 3 riflemen from Baker Company requested that Cadwallader build similar sights for their rifles. Cadwallader agreed. He scavenged additional lenses from destroyed German vehicles, 2 from periscope assemblies, 1 from a range-finding device recovered from an abandoned artillery position. He carved mounting brackets from wooden debris available in the bocage, broken fence posts, furniture from bombed buildings, sections of cart axles. The carving process was time-intensive, requiring 8 to 12 hours per bracket to achieve proper fit and alignment. Cadwallader completed 3 additional sights by August 7. The riflemen who received them achieved successful engagements at extended range, though their effectiveness varied based on individual marksmanship skill and the quality of the specific lens and mounting bracket. Word of the improvised sights spread through informal soldier communication. A corporal from Charlie Company heard about the devices and requested one for a rifleman in his section who had civilian hunting experience. Cadwallader built it. A sergeant from Dog Company requested 2. Cadwallader built those as well. By August 14, 9 soldiers in the 6th Battalion Durham Light Infantry were using improvised telescopic sights constructed by Cadwallader. The sights were not identical. Lens magnification varied from 3 to 5 times depending on the source optic. Wooden brackets varied in shape and weight depending on available materials, and alignment quality varied based on how much time Cadwallader had available for test firing and adjustment. But all 9 sights enabled their users to engage targets at ranges beyond the effective capability of iron sights. Combined, the 9 soldiers achieved an estimated 26 kills of German reconnaissance personnel between July 25 and August 14, and German scout activity in the battalion sector declined significantly. The battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Ashford, learned of the improvised sights on August 9 during a briefing on reduced casualty rates from enemy artillery. Ashford questioned how German observation activity had been suppressed without dedicated sniper support. Company commanders explained that riflemen were achieving extended-range kills using improvised optical sights. Ashford inspected one of Cadwallader's sights and interviewed Cadwallader about its construction and effectiveness. Ashford's assessment was that the devices were tactically effective but represented unauthorized modifications to service rifles that violated regulations. However, the devices had demonstrably reduced casualties, they were removable and did not permanently damage the rifles, and enforcing regulations against their use would result in increased deaths from enemy artillery spotting. Ashford decided to tolerate the improvised sights as a temporary measure until official sniper support became available. He did not formally authorize the devices, but he instructed company commanders not to prohibit their use. The improvised sights spread to 3 additional battalions in the 50th Division by late August. Soldiers from other units observed the 6th Battalion's riflemen using the devices and requested similar equipment. Cadwallader could not build sights for an entire division. He lacked time and materials. Other soldiers with woodworking skills or mechanical aptitude attempted to replicate the design. The quality of these replications varied widely. Some were functional. Others were poorly aligned, too heavy, or mechanically unsound. A lance corporal from the 7th Battalion, Green Howards, built an improvised sight using a lens from a pair of German binoculars and a mounting bracket carved from a rifle stock salvaged from a destroyed weapon. The device worked adequately but broke after 60 rounds due to structural failure of the wooden bracket. A private from the 8th Battalion constructed a sight using a magnifying glass stolen from a French schoolhouse and a bracket fabricated from bent metal strapping. The device was functional but excessively heavy and affected the rifle's handling characteristics. The spread of improvised sights ended in September 1944 when sniper rifles with proper telescopic sights began arriving in sufficient quantities to equip dedicated marksmen in each battalion. The Lee Enfield No. 4 rifle, T, with a No. 32 telescopic sight became available through official supply channels, and soldiers trained as snipers were issued these weapons for counter-reconnaissance and long-range engagement missions. The improvised sights were no longer necessary. Soldiers removed them from their rifles and discarded them. Cadwallader dismantled his original sight in mid-September and threw the wooden bracket into a fire. He kept the lens as a souvenir but lost it during subsequent operations. By October 1944, no soldiers in the 50th Division were using improvised optical sights. The innovation had solved a problem that existed for 8 weeks, and when official equipment arrived to replace it, the innovation became obsolete. Cadwallader remained with the 6th Battalion through the remainder of the Normandy campaign and into the advance through Belgium and the Netherlands. He was not wounded. He was not decorated for the improvised sight. His confirmed kills using the device were recorded in company records as routine enemy casualties, not as exceptional achievements meriting commendation. He was promoted to Lance Corporal in October 1944 based on battlefield attrition and the need for section leaders, not as recognition for the improvised sight. He served through the end of the war in Europe and was demobilized in June 1945. He returned to Bedgelert and resumed work on his family's sheep farm. He married in 1947, fathered 3 children, and operated the farm until his retirement in 1971. He did not speak about the war. His family knew he had served in Normandy but had no knowledge of the improvised sight or his kills of German reconnaissance personnel. He died in January 1987 at age 81. The story survived in a single document. A British Army intelligence report filed by the 50th Division's Intelligence Section in September 1944 summarized counter-reconnaissance measures employed by division units during operations in Normandy. The report included a brief section on improvised rifle optics that described soldiers constructing telescopic sights from salvaged materials to engage enemy observers at extended range. The report noted that the improvised sights had been effective but were no longer in use following the availability of official sniper rifles. The report did not identify Cadwallader by name or provide detailed technical descriptions of the sight construction. The report was filed with division operational records and transferred to the British National Archives in 1968. It was not reviewed by military historians until 1994, when a researcher studying British infantry tactics in Normandy encountered the reference to improvised rifle optics and noted it as an example of soldier-level adaptation to tactical problems. The researcher attempted to identify specific individuals involved but found no records connecting particular soldiers to the improvised sights. Cadwallader's role was not documented until 2011, when a researcher cross-referencing personnel records with unit after-action reports identified Cadwallader as a rifleman in Baker Company, 6th Battalion, during the period when improvised sights were used, and discovered a notation in company records crediting Cadwallader with multiple confirmed kills at extended range during late July and early August 1944. The quantified impact of Cadwallader's innovation can be estimated with reasonable accuracy. Cadwallader personally achieved 11 confirmed kills of German reconnaissance personnel between July 25 and August 14, 1944. The 8 additional soldiers using sights Cadwallader constructed achieved an estimated 15 additional kills during the same period. Soldiers and other units using replicated designs achieved an estimated 12 kills. Combined, the improvised sights enabled approximately 38 confirmed kills of German scouts across the 50th Division during an 8-week period. More significantly, the kills forced German reconnaissance teams to operate at ranges beyond 600 meters, where observation quality was degraded and artillery spotting was less accurate. British casualties from spotted artillery in the division's sector dropped from an average of 2.1 per day in early July to 0.5 per day in August, a reduction of 76%. The reduction was not entirely attributable to the improvised sights. German artillery ammunition shortages and Allied air superiority also contributed, but divisional intelligence assessments credited the suppression of German close-range observation as a primary factor. The improvised sights saved an estimated 43 British lives during their 8-week operational period. The reason the innovation did not persist beyond that period is straightforward. The improvised sights were a temporary solution to an equipment shortage. British doctrine in 1944 recognized the value of optical sights for precision rifle fire. That was why sniper rifles with telescopic sights existed. The problem was that sniper rifles were scarce in July 1944, and infantry battalions did not have enough of them to counter the volume of German reconnaissance activity in the bocage. Cadwallader's improvised sights filled the gap until supply chains delivered sufficient sniper rifles to meet operational needs. When official equipment arrived, the improvised solutions were discarded. The innovation was never intended to replace official equipment, it was intended to survive until official equipment became available. Hundreds of stories like this exist in after-action reports, forgotten unit diaries, and declassified intelligence files. I've spent years finding them. Subscribe, you get one every single week. Next, watch this video on how a toolmaker's understanding of leverage mechanics stopped German tank advances with improvised anti-tank obstacles that engineers said couldn't work. Then comment below, which forgotten soldier innovation should I cover next? I've got the list. I want to know who you want to hear about. See you in the next one. The broader significance of Owen Cadwallader's improvised rifle sight lies not in its technical sophistication, which was minimal, but in its recognition that equipment limitations can be overcome by soldiers with relevant civilian skills when institutional supply systems fail to meet tactical needs. British Army doctrine in 1944 assumed that infantry battalions would have access to sniper rifles for engaging targets beyond the effective range of standard infantry weapons. When that assumption failed, when sniper rifles were not available in sufficient quantities to counter German reconnaissance activity in Normandy, doctrine offered no alternative except to accept casualties from enemy observation. Cadwallader understood that the problem was not that British infantry lacked the capability to engage German scouts at 400 meters, it was that they lacked the equipment to do so effectively. The innovation required no new technology, no supply chain, no command approval. It required only salvaged optics, scrap wood, a bayonet for carving, and the knowledge that magnification enables precision at extended range. 38 German reconnaissance personnel were killed by soldiers using improvised sights they built from battlefield debris and farm equipment. Those scouts would have continued observing British positions, directing artillery fire, and causing casualties if the improvised sights had not existed. 43 British soldiers survived August 1944 who would have died from spotted artillery if German scouts had continued operating at close range. The Normandy campaign continued through August, the 50th Division advanced into Belgium in September, and the improvised sights ended when official sniper rifles arrived. The innovation was perfectly suited to one specific equipment shortage in one specific theater during one specific 2-month period. It solved nothing after sniper rifles became available. Cadwallader's improvised sight was a solution to the absence of telescopic rifle optics in British infantry battalions in Normandy in July and August 1944. And when that absence was corrected through supply delivery, the solution became obsolete. Military innovation often works this way, highly effective in narrow circumstances, useless everywhere else. remembered only if someone bothers to document it. Cadwallader did not document it. He dismantled his sight and discarded it when it was no longer needed. The Division Intelligence Report documented the phenomenon without naming the inventor. The innovation succeeded because one soldier recognized a problem no one else solved and applied knowledge no one else had. It disappeared because the problem was temporary, the knowledge was not transferable, and no one believed a piece of carved wood and a salvaged lens was worth preserving after proper equipment arrived.